Good morning, everybody. This meeting is to talk about the progress on the CRT Rebuilding program. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to say a few things, and then I'd like, if anybody else has comments, I have a second microphone. And if you guys would come up and just stand right here, because we're also on the internet, to make your comments. So I'll bring you up to date on the project. First of all, as you know, most of you know, the racks equipment arrived finally, and it's right here. And it's basically equipment for rephosphoring and aluminizing tubes, which is something we hope to do sometime in the future. But our first attempt is going to be with. Can you ask them to be quiet outside? Yeah, I think they're gone now. We scared them away. Our first attempt is going to be with color tubes, which of course don't need that, and then with some black and white tubes. We have the room finished. All of the equipment is in place, and that's basically the stuff from Hawkeye. The lathes have been tested and played with and so forth, so it's essentially ready to go as soon as somebody wants to attempt doing a tube. We got from Scotty and from Racks and from a couple of other sources a nice supply of materials, cathodes, getters, glass of various sorts. So we've got all the materials to get going. The problem is the same problem we've had before. Who's going to run this? And so it's essentially sitting there waiting for somebody to take over management of the project, which is a fairly complicated thing. So before we can start doing tubes for other people or for ourselves, we've got to have that problem solved. And but it's sitting here waiting, so we're ready to go now. There is going to be, I think Nick Williams is coming to the museum shortly. I've heard two stories. He may be making two trips, but in mid-May and in July, to play around with the equipment. And he'll probably do a tube or two while he's here. He's going to be here for a few days, and we'll publicize it. And if anyone wants to come down.
Does everyone know who Nick is?
No. Okay, Nick is an ETF member who is in the Navy, couldn't be at the convention, but he spent 2 weeks in France learning the racks process. So he is the most knowledgeable in terms of how to rebuild a tube, maybe with the exception of John Yurkon. Well, of course, John's expertise is in a different area. And John, are you here?
No, he said he has to leave early, unfortunately.
Okay, well then I'll cover what John has been doing too. So if any of you want to come for that process, we'd love to have you. The more people, the better, to watch what he's doing. So that's where we are on that. John's project is a little bit different. He has built his own oven, and he's borrowed one of the lathes that we got from Hawkeye. He's been working on rebuilding a 15 GP22, and the process he's used is that he is cutting out the ultra ring, which is metal, and that's where the leakage problem takes place. And then he's welded the faceplate to the shell of the tube, and he is very close to successfully, hopefully, doing a tube. Just before the convention, he took a 21AX P22, which has a similar gun and similar neck, and successfully put a rebuilt gun in, and then sealed it and evacuated it and activated the cathodes. The tube on a tube tester checks good. I think Bob Gallanter is taking it back to Milwaukee with him, and he's going to put it in a test jig he's got and see how it does.
John Yurkon also repaired a leak. John Yurkon also repaired a leak in the 21AX P22 by using a TIG welder to re-weld the flange seam, a part of the flange seam.
So hopefully, within a few weeks, we'll have a report from John that he's done the 15 GP22. Of course, it's a long way from doing one tube to being able to do it for all the collectors out there. Though I think everybody is pretty optimistic that it's feasible to do it, because I think collectors who own CT100s would probably pay $1,000, $1,500 for a tube. So we've got some money to work with, and that's probably enough to cover the cost of doing this tube, even though it's a pretty complex process. But again, we're waiting for the management to be able to do that on a production type basis. And by production, I don't mean 50 tubes a day. I mean, a few tubes a month.
The
Why don't you take that?
okay. Very high trouble. The work that John was doing required some special grinding and facing processes on the glass. Is that type of process going to be available if we were to do the work here, or is that something that's only available in his laboratory?
John?
Well, you need to be able to do two things. You need to be able to make a circular cut to separate the whole ring, and that's two glass cuts. You have to build some sort of a jig to make the glass cuts, and then you need glass lapping equipment to face the two cuts so they're smooth and square. A couple of $1,000 will get you the lapping equipment. It's possible that Bob Gallanter might build a jig to do the cuts. But that's all fairly technical stuff, and it also, to some extent, depends upon having a 15G that doesn't have a lot of glass fractures in it. And unfortunately, a lot of them have glass fractures. So, while Yurkon's going to probably be successful with his attempt, I'm not sure how reproducible that process is going to turn out to be. It's all to be determined.
Right, I think that's true. But I think that he has shown that we can do the 21, the metal 21-inch tubes.
Oh, certainly. I think those are very real.
And of course, then the glass 21-inch tubes also will be the same thing.
Even more so.
Even more so, right. The other end of the spectrum is the common tubes, 10 BP4s, 12 LP4s, and so forth. And the issue there is not whether we can do them. I'm sure we can do them. The question is, can we do them at a price that collectors will pay? Now, of course, over time, collectors will pay more and more as tubes become harder and harder to find out of junk sets. But right now, we don't know the economics of that. Again, we need the management to see if that's possible. I'm sort of optimistic about that too, because the costs of doing a tube like that are way lower than a color tube in terms of the gun part of it. So, and we've explored. It looks like what we're going to need to do on the black and white tubes and the color tubes too. We're probably going to have the capability of rebuilding the guns ourselves, which means putting in new cathodes and filaments, which is doable. As I say, we have material. We have most of the materials to do that. So it comes down to finding, the right person who steps up and is willing to manage this. I don't. That's not a paid position. That's somebody who loves it and wants to take it on as a project. And now the person who actually does the rebuilding work, I'm sure will hire somebody who will work in the facility to do it. So that's basically where we are. Anybody else have any more comments, questions? Maybe you want to pass the microphone. Yeah, just keep it on.
Okay.
It's hard. The switch is pretty. It's pretty hard to push up.
Hello?
No, it's really stiff. You need to slide it way. You have to have really strong fingernails. Yeah, you got it.
Given that production of getters, cathodes, and guns has sort of ceased just about everywhere in the world, about how many tubes do you think we'll be able to have the capability of rebuilding before we start running into the situation of having to build our own goods, cathodes, and getters.
Well, again, I think we're counting on being able to rebuild the guns that are in the tubes. So the issue then becomes heaters and cathodes and the spacers that go with them. We have, I think, 400 usable cathodes now, assuming they haven't deteriorated, because of temperature and humidity. So we've got about 400. We've got about the same number of heaters, and that's a lot of tubes. Long term, we're going to have to find a solution, but I think that's a couple of years, several years away. So
I was wondering, you say that you've got that several hundred cathodes and heaters and such like that. Are they all the same type, or?
basically, the kinds of tubes that we're going to want to rebuild, I think, are use the same same type. Yeah, because I think our concentration is going to be on the early, before 1955 tubes. Now we may take on, they're predicted tubes, for instance, that are just extremely in demand. There's a whole collecting community of predictas, and we could get substantially more money for them than we could for a 10 BP4, for instance. So it may make sense for economic reasons to bring some income into the process to do something like that. And I don't know what will happen from then.
This is kind of a non-profit enterprise, isn't it?
Well, it's a nonprofit in one of two ways. The goal may be that it breaks even, and again, this is the business. We need the management to figure this out. But one possibility is that the process makes some, makes no money. It's a break even for collectors. The other possibility is that there's built into it some money for the museum. I don't know how that's going to come out.
I won't need it. I talked to Steve the other day, and I told him that I was going to take some sets and basically take them apart and scrap them. Steve said, for now, it's a good idea, and that's what I'm going to do. Take some round tubes, and just set them aside until we're ready for it here. Then I'll bring them in and whatever.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be probably a lot of early mistakes and stuff.
Right.
So we'll need those duds to work off. So I'm going to do that, and I think everybody else, right? Hang on.
Yeah, just please don't bring them here. And I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know if you see it, but across the top of this, where the insulation up there, is I think 2 rows of duds. So we don't want them, but don't trash them. Hold on to them, and we may need them sometime. Can you pass the mic? Oh, just a second. Let's pass the mic around so people can hear.
Is it possible to recoat a cathode, since what usually goes wrong to this material just deteriorates? Is it possible to recoat one and then be able to reuse it?
The answer is yes. In fact, that's one of the processes we were looking at, and that may be the ultimate solution. It's a little trickier, but I think probably that that may be what we do after we run out of cathodes. Pass the mic up.
Still on here. Did Scotty provide you with his books so that you could break down what his expenses were and what he figured he was making on each tube? Because he had a standardized price. As I remember, I put a lot of tubes through there, and it was always the same number. Didn't matter what the tube was, but it would have given you an idea of what it returned, or how many tubes he was doing a day if there were.
He didn't, and I'm not sure that would be real helpful, because he had an oven that did 8 tubes at a time. No, but the answer is no. We don't have that.
Yeah, I'll talk loud. I went out and did a story, wrote about a 38-page piece for the Antique Wireless Association's review. Thank you. And I got the information, the peak, the zenith of the business, how many tubes a day they were processing, how many people they employed, and of course it trickled down to almost nothing. That's why he gave up and went under in 2010. But I do believe that number is in that article, along with processing times and temperatures. I captured as much as I could about his business. in the 3 or 4 days I was out there.
Wonderful. I didn't know that. Could you
You need
send
to
it to
get
me?
the AWA review, and
Yeah.
I think it was the 2010 AWA review.
Can you send it?
I'll have to get one there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Down to Chuck.
I didn't hear how many getters you have and whether you can keep getting getters or will that be a
I think we have like 8,000 getters.
Don't go quick.
Now, some of these things, are used in other products, like getters, for instance. Now, I don't know if the same ones will be usable, but there are all kinds of other things that that still use getters.
Would it be practical to kind of separate the glass portion of it from the gun portion of it? And maybe even think about letting the gun portion go off site to somebody that can handle it instead of driving to Hilliard all the time.
Absolutely. I think the guns would be a perfect thing to do with that because the shipping costs would be so low. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Oh, wait, here's one more.
Could the member over there expand again on the fracture problems with the 15G?
Sure. Hand it, John wants it.
If you look at a 15G, on almost all of them you see there's a lot of little hairline cracks around the ultor ring where the glass to metal seal is made. And those are potentially going to behave badly during processing as you run the temperature up and down. We've had cases where tubes have separated altogether from the ultor ring and had the face drop off of them. Because a crack propagates and suddenly goes whoop, and runs all the way around the tube and the face falls off. And we've certainly had cases where we rebuilt the tube that wasn't leaking, mine, tragically, and it tested perfectly good, and a month later it started leaking, probably around one of those cracks. So that may prove to be problematic. Now, there's talk about trying to seal cracks using high temperature epoxies and frit, but that's all unproven territory at this point.
Okay. Anything else? Well, we're making progress, slow. Maybe in our lifetimes, it'll happen.